Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Oh, come on. Okay, do it again. Good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, that's more like it. Thank you. Thank you for the support. Okay, so I hope you all know what this session is all about. Okay, so we have Ajahn Brahm will be celebrating his 50th anniversary as a monk on the 5th of December. So we've decided to do a 5-week celebration for this big occasion. And so the 5-week has actually started last night with Ajahn Brahmali kind of like doing a talk on Ajahn Brahm. And then we have also decided that every Saturday from 4:15 to 5 p.m., we will be inviting the monks and nuns to give a Dharma talk or a panel discussion or a dialogue. And initially I told Ajahn Brahmali, I said, I want not the usual teachers. And then he said, so you don't want me to teach? I'm like, yes. But anyway, he was very kind. So he he invited some junior monks. So we'll be seeing some the faces of monks that have not appeared here, maybe except for Venerable Nibuto. But anyway, and then for the nuns, we have, as of now, we've got 2 nuns. So we've got Ajahn Munissara here today, which Ajahn Munissara, I was telling you earlier, we have a nuns, what did she call it? A nuns squad? Ramani, where are you? Oh yeah, so what did you say? It was nuns supporting squad or something. Yeah, she's all excited about coming here. Ajahn Brahmali, sorry, we are all for the nuns today.
Yeah, good, yeah, excellent. Yeah.
Okay, so welcome everyone to this session. And for today, both Ajahn Brahmali and Ajahn Munissara will be having a dialogue, and the topic is, who is the real Ajahn Brahm? So with that, I'll hand that over to both of them. And thanks for being here.
Thank you. Okay. Good, thank you, Lahar. So, I have just been talking before last night. I talked about Ajahn Brahm for 1 hour last night. I have nothing more to say. So now I have to kind of give it over to you.
Nice try.
That's what she was saying is about the nuns tonight.
Unfortunately, I didn't listen to the talk, so I don't know what will be repetitive.
Yeah.
But
that's.
But I used to be a journalist.
Okay.
So I prepared my list of questions.
Whoa, this is scary.
So
I'm in trouble. No, okay, I'm in serious trouble.
I don't know if some of this would be the material of a Friday night talk, so I'm sure I can ask something that'll be
stir me up
informative.
Or kind of scare me or stir me up or something. Wow.
No, I'm kidding. I'm very nice.
I'm nervous now. This is kind of dangerous. Okay, so who should start? Who should start to ask him? I want to start asking you because I think it's nice to hear from you now because I heard too much from me already. You could hear Leha, she wanted junior monks, she kind of seen too much from me.
But you have to give me some time because this is one of my rare occasions to be able to pick your brain about the Bodhinyana version of Ajahn Brahm.
Okay, fair enough. So we'll get to that, yeah? Mm-hmm. But what I want to ask, one of the things I was talking about yesterday was how I was inspired by Ajahn Brahm, what made me come to become his disciple, and I want to ask the same of you. If you can tell your story a little bit and the kind of qualities that inspired you in Ajahn Brahm, that would be wonderful.
Okay, can I just, is this the clock or that's your eyeglass case? Can we maybe put the clock here? So
yeah,
we have a sense
clock is coming. Yeah, the super tuck is bringing the clock here. Super duper tuck. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we have till 5, is that correct?
We have to 5, but we can maybe extend it as well.
4:23.
Yeah, we can always extend it.
Okay, good.
So
because
just talk. Yeah.
Y'all can go home, and I will continue to investigate. But how did I first came across Ajahn Brahm's teachings through his book. I was staying at, for the Thai people here, Luang Por Ban's monastery, which is very famous, respected Thai monk of the forest tradition. And it was my first time staying in a monastery, so I was getting a bit bored out of my skull. Luckily, my relative had brought a copy of this book, Opening the Door of Your Heart. And I mean, it just looked like, some brown book with a Bodhi leaf on it, like totally like cliche, normal Dhamma book type thing. So I didn't really think it would be anything that interesting. But when I opened it up, sorry to say. Not that the Dhamma is not interesting, but then when I opened it up, it was like, oh, well, these really, really not only entertaining stories, but they were really concise nuggets of profound wisdom, and many of them really spoke to me, and so I was just I read, I think, the whole book, and I was very touched by those teachings, but I didn't expect that I would ever come across this monk because I'd never heard of him before, and he lives in Australia, so, you know. But then, the next month, he came to Thailand to give a series of talks. And so at the time, I was still writing for the Bangkok Post, which is an English language newspaper. So I suggested to my editor that, oh, you know, what if I interview this monk? I read his stories, they're really good. And so I went to this big public talk that he was giving, and I remember, I mean, I'd been to Dhamma talks before, and I'd listened to other monks teach before, but I guess it was just maybe also because he's a Western monk. I think in Thailand, you know, you feel a bit like, like all the monks are very well behaved and prim and proper, and you feel you also have to be extra prim and proper. But he was really relaxed and really kind of approachable. And the talks itself was just full of really more of the same, kind of like the stories. And what can I say? I'm a sucker for, you know, a quick wit. I was really sort of, it spoke to me when he was able to give a Dhamma teaching in just a short, snappy quip or something like that. I mean, later on, I found out that some of his really good quips is just the stuff he uses all the time. But because this is my first talk I ever did, I was like, brilliant, this is brilliant, you know. But I mean, it's still brilliant, 100th time round. But the thing is, that wasn't just that. I mean, anyone can be funny. But what I felt was that there was something there that was behind that, you know, that he was really speaking from his own wisdom, and that humor and whatever it was emanating kindness. It wasn't just humor for the sake of entertainment, but the sake of connecting with people from a kind place. And when I had the chance to interview him after the talk, and also during the talk, what I liked was that he said at the Q&A part that you can ask anything, you can ask any question. And in Thai culture, it's not really to be done to sort of like challenge the teacher, or, you know, like kind of, you can't ask anything, as I found out myself, being not really born in Thailand and finding out, no, you're not supposed to ask those kind of questions of the teacher. But I felt with him, he was very open, and that I really appreciated that, because as you well know, Ajahn Brahmali, I like to ask questions, and if I can't ask my questions freely, I feel you cannot be my teacher. And so with him, I felt he was very open to that. But also it was because he was so enthusiastic and had so much energy for sharing the Dhamma. Like, even, I mean, it's already late in the night after you give the talk. It's already, you know, 8 p.m., whatever. But we went back to his hotel with his, you know, entourage of lay people, and I continued to interview him. And you know how you know, lay people are often very protective of their monks, and, you know, as I was asking many questions, they're like, okay, he's tired now, you probably got to let him rest. And he was like, no, I've got lots of energy, and he let me keep going. So it was a very long interview. But I appreciated that enthusiasm and that energy and that generosity in being able to, just let this person he doesn't even know just keep asking him lots and lots of questions. But I think he also knows, because it's going into a public medium, he's able to share the Dhamma through this interview more widely. And so that was his compassionate reason for keeping on going. So those are some of the things that first made an impression on me.
Okay.
Yes.
That's excellent. So what was it among those things that kind of, was it anything about, I mean, you already wanted to think about becoming a bhikkhuni already, right? This wasn't kind of the beginning of it. This already had occurred to you to become a nun, is that right? Or,
I mean, I had this feeling for like a long time already, but I didn't, at that point, this was 2005. So, you know, none of this stuff about bhikkhuni ordination had happened yet. And I didn't really, I didn't even know he had there was Dhammasara nuns monastery affiliated with Bodhinyana. I mean, I just came across his book. So at that point, that wasn't something that, it wasn't like, oh, Ajahn Brahm, the monk who likes to support nuns. I mean, that wasn't my reason of being interested. What really got me interested was that I noticed, I mean, I was like a missionary. Like, after I got that book, they had like boxes of it. I'm like, please give me like a gazillion boxes, and I'm going to spread the word. And I gave it to all sorts of people, and I gave it to my friends in America for the wedding present. These are not Buddhist people, but these are stories that can touch anyone's heart, because I really felt it was the weirdest thing. Like, I really felt it literally opened the door of my heart. Like, somehow reading those books, like, yes, I had been practicing Dhamma, I'd been going to Dhamma talks before for years, but something about, I don't know, it was straight. It just really felt like it opened my heart more and let the Dhamma come in more easily. I can't quite explain, but that's how I felt. And so I felt that, well, this is someone I would like to follow as a student. And that's kind of how it began.
It's kind of interesting, isn't it? I mean, you would think that someone who gave a profound teaching about the 5 aggregates and the 5 hindrances straight out of the suttas might be more, acceptable as a teacher in a way. You feel like they're coming from the word of the Buddha and all these kind of things. And then you get someone like Ajahn Brahm who actually teaches in a completely different way here. And it's more powerful. So what are your thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think everyone is expecting someone to teach about the 5 aggregates from the suttas. Maybe that's your style.
Uh-oh.
I mean, I had read already about the 5 aggregates, so I found them very confusing. I'm like, what are these 5 aggregates, especially Sankhara? What the heck does that mean? Mental volition. I'm like, what is that? But yeah, I mean, I think for me, I was just, I wasn't that learned or anything. I was just starting to get more immersed in the Dhamma. I felt that that's why I connected strongly with the forest tradition, because I felt these monks were practitioners who had really, they have somehow put into practice the Noble Eightfold Path in a way that led to some major fruits. So whether they can quote sutta chapter or verse or not, it didn't matter to me, because I couldn't quote sutta chapter or verse. I mean, I still had not figured out Digha Nikaya, Majjhima Nikaya, what are all these Nikayas? At that point I didn't even know yet. So I just wanted teachings that spoke to me and actually, applied to the problems I had in my life, and I felt gave me a sense of, okay, this is how to go about them. And so that's why that appealed to me.
Good, that makes sense. It makes a lot of sense to me. But it's interesting though, because one of the things I was saying yesterday as well was this: that when you choose a teacher, you choose a teacher for a large number of reasons. And one thing is that they're part of the forest tradition, but forest tradition does not necessarily mean that they are incredibly wide. There's a wide diversity within the forest tradition as well. So that's kind of only one criteria. There's much more coming into it than that. Yeah, it is the feeling of the person, how they present these things.
Oh yeah. No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that I was like, oh, Ajahn Brahm, he's forest tradition. I'm just saying that the kinds of teachings I've been listening to in that time were the ones that spoke to me the most were Ajahn Chah lineage monks or forest tradition monks, because they applied to my problems. And so I was looking. I was. I remember around this time, I had been like going to different meditation traditions and going to their retreats, and they were always, what bothered me about everybody was that they would always say that the other people have got it wrong, and I was just this little newbie, and it was just all very confusing. But it also turned me off that kind of narrow-mindedness. And I was just like, I can't make sense of who's right, who's wrong. I really just want to find my teacher. I put it out to the universe, like, I'm looking for my teacher, and somehow, opening of the door, your heart just sort of, floated towards me. And and that first talk, sometimes you just feel like you resonate on a personal level with somebody. And I think that there was that element too, that somehow I just connected with him on a non-intellectual level. I just felt like, yeah, it wasn't immediately that I knew, but I think in a combination of the next few years, I would listen to his talks whenever he came to Bangkok and that kind of thing. So I think it's something about, yeah, we were talking about this in the car with, the lady who kindly brought us from Munissara, that I was like, well, how did you, start coming to Dhammaloka? This is my equivalent of, why did you become a nun? And she was saying that she could sense somehow his compassion and kindness. And I thought, yeah, that's how I felt too.
Okay, that's cool. That's wonderful. That's great. So that's how you started out. You heard his talk in Bangkok. You heard his wit, his quickness of kind of responding to questions. That was also very impressive with me. Sometimes he could make so fast with the responses, and it wasn't always the same thing. Sometimes it was new things.
Yeah, that's why I really enjoy his Q&As at Jhana Grove, because that's where I mean, the talk sometimes it's it's the material that you may have heard, but it's the Q&A and how he can kind of like come up with stuff. You're like, this is why I come for the not for the. I mean, it just shows you that he's he doesn't have to read from some kind of script, he's got the Dhamma in him, and he can just kind of like it can just come out.
Yeah, no, exactly. That was actually one of the things that really impressed me with Ajahn Brahm in the early days, was the fact that he could sit down behind a microphone or without microphone or whatever, and he could talk, and his talks were fluent. It wasn't like you talk and you stop a bit to think what you're going to say next and you carry on. Yeah, this is kind of very common in the Buddhist world, that you don't have that fluency. But for him, it was like the Dhamma was flowing. Yeah, it was flowing and flowing, and he could keep going for an hour or more sometimes. Yeah, just kind of this natural flow in a sense. And it came out, not only was it flowing like that, but it came out in a structured way, as if the whole picture of the Dhamma was in his mind, and he knew exactly where he was going. And of course, later on, I realized in the suttas, the Buddha talks about how you should give a Dhamma talk. And the Buddha says specifically it's difficult to give a Dhamma talk. Why? Because one of the reasons, it should be progressive. And I could see, that was exactly what Ajahn Brahm was doing. I don't know if he had read that sutta or not, but that was anyway, that's kind of the idea.
What do you mean by progressive?
It should have a certain starting point and it should have an end point. There should be a connection between the two that flows naturally, so it goes. It can mean other things as well. It can mean, starting with the more basic things, ending with the higher things, but it means that there is a kind of a natural sequence and a connection between the ideas that lead from a certain point to an end point.
When was that? What era of... Like, when was he talking like that?
Well, he certainly was talking about that in the mid-90s, So that was when I came.
Was that
when
Perth, you were Sten?
Who is this person? This person has gone down in history. Yeah, that was when I was, exactly. So I came as an Agaric over here, So
in his early, I haven't actually, because they don't have recordings until 99, actually, the recordings of the talks he gave at Bodhinyana. So
we do.
You do? Okay.
Sure, yeah, you have to dig them out.
Really?
I think we do.
We must go and raid your hard drive.
Yeah, you have to raid us. Yeah.
Okay, but so I didn't, or maybe we just have, but they weren't complete. They weren't like now we have the whole year's worth. But anyway, the point was I can see that it's very different from how he teaches now. When you say about the structure and the, sorry. Can I just, this is, since we're on this point, can I just do my little bit of asking? But how have you seen his teaching style evolve since those early days where I've listened to some like 1990s, late 1990s, and they're very, they are very structured and they're quite substantial. Like, the content is very rich, and it's not so jokey. But then I guess that's evolved. So maybe you've seen the whole evolution. So could you give us a bit of a?
I've seen pretty much the whole thing, because actually he started out as the abbot of Bodhinyana Monastery. That was in '94, and that's when I came to Bodhinyana Monastery. So that was kind of his starting point. And so I asked him a few years ago, I asked Ajahn Brahm, well, how come your talks have changed so much? In the early days, they were so substantial, so powerful, also really strong Dhamma, the way you taught. Now it's kind of very jokey and very, much more good fun. It's not quite as jokey in the monastery as it is here at Dhammaloka Center. Actually, sometimes it isn't that. Sometimes in this range, they give some pretty profound talks, really powerful ones with very few jokes. Sometimes there wasn't even a single laugh, I think, during the whole talk. That's kind of remarkable for Ajahn Brahm. And so I asked him this question, how come, what has happened? And he said that, well, in the early days, he was kind of setting out the Dhamma as he understood it. And he felt once it has been set out, he didn't have to redo that. It was done once and for all. And then he just kind of had to kind of carry on with the inspirational thing. And this, I think, is one of those aspects of the Dhamma. The Dhamma has two aspects to it. And one of them is to kind of educate people about what the Dhamma looks like, the various aspects of the Dhamma, how it all holds together, dependent origination, what have you. And then the second part, which is equally important, is to inspire people. And those two things come together. I think he had that kind of educational part the first 5 years or 10 years, and then he went over to the inspirational part, and now he's just pure inspiration. And there's a lot of truth to that idea, that you learn the Dhamma and then you need to be inspired to keep on practicing. But I think that what he underestimates is that there's always new people coming on board, and they need that kind of understanding, that grounding in the Dhamma before the inspiration really can work. Once you understand the tapestry of the Dhamma, the picture of what it is about, how all the bits and pieces fit together, once you have got that, okay, then the inspiration will keep that understanding going and make it practically apply that understanding in your daily life. So I think that is what's going on with Ajahn Brahm. And I think now, the way I understand Ajahn Brahm is that he is basically a salesman of happiness. That's what it is. He's selling happiness. And the way he does that is that, Ajahn Brahm has so much happiness and joy from the Dhamma, it all coming from the inside. And so all the jokes and all the stories, they are like a bubbling over of that inner joy coming out in his own personal way. And partly because he's British, I don't know, it comes out in jokes and this kind of things, I'm not sure. It really depends. Because British are kind of humor is a very, very important part of British culture, right? So you can expect...
They're very reserved, aren't they?
Ajahn Brahm is actually a surprisingly reserved person. I think he is naturally... He doesn't come across that way, but I think naturally he's quite introverted, actually, as a person. And so So that's kind of how I see his change and why he has done what he has done. But I want to bring this back to you now. Before I saw you opening your mouth, I'm going to cut you off quickly before you get a chance to say anything. So I want to ask you as well, what do you see? Because you just talked about the early talks in Bangkok or whatever. How do you see that change in Ajahn Brahm?
The change? Well, I mean, it's different because the public talks that you give to a large audience will tend to be the jokey type, right? Because that's kind of what's called for. But I guess... I can't really speak to his evolution in terms of his public talks because, if anything, I felt they got even jokier over time. There was a point when I was like, I can't listen to these Friday night talks. They're just over the top, like too much energy and entertainment. But the thing is, I think being able to speak to his evolution as a person. Or as a teacher, the only one that's really clear to me is his girth has changed over the years. But I think maybe someone who lives with him can better speak to that. Because I was reflecting on this, actually, because I was thinking to myself, see, what I would like to hear from Ajahn Brahmali is how he is with the monks. Because he's probably different with the monks than he is with lay people. And he's probably different with the nuns. And also, actually, the nuns, we have the least contact with him because, I was just thinking, when I was a layperson, I also had the privilege of being able to interview him as a journalist, and that's really just a trick to get more time to ask him stuff. In addition to, spreading the Dhamma. But then actually, if I think about like super long more than an hour long conversations, that only happened when I was a journalist and maybe only rarely sometimes as a nun. So usually I only have quite short interactions that are not like a formal Dhamma talk or, so it's... So I actually don't feel like I'm the most qualified person to speak of his evolution.
Okay. Yes.
Can you speak to it?
I can, but should I? That's another question.
A little bit, because this is supposed to be a dialogue.
It's dialogue, okay.
It's not supposed to be a
monologue. Yeah.
one way.
Yeah,
so
no, yeah, monologue, dialogue is all the same. You know, it's, as long as it's log is the important part there, not dialogue.
lay heart.
Yeah.
What are the rules here?
dialogue. Yeah, okay. Yeah. So yes. So what is it like with the monks? And he is. There's so many kind of nice little things about Ajahn Brahm. And one of the things, being a monk for 30 years with him, is that so long I can't even. To me, he's become natural now. I can't really pull it apart so easily anymore. But I would say one of the kind of things I like about Ajahn Brahm is just his presence sometimes.
His what?
His presence. So very often in the monastery, when he is out among people, he can be very chatty, right? He talks to people and he hangs around. Even though he's introverted, he does the chatty part. And people think that he is an extrovert and that he's very sociable and these kind of things. But actually he's not. When you know Ajahn Brahm, he will often come into the dana sala at the monastery. We have a tea together, yeah? And often he will just sit there, yeah? And like, you know how he sits? He sits like really like this. He's really kind of super relaxed. And then he will have his cup of tea, yeah? And then he won't really say anything, yeah? And some monks may come in and they may have a conversation with each other. Ajahn Brahm would just sit there and listen. He won't say anything, yeah? He doesn't really engage unless there's something really to be engaged with. And there's something very beautiful about that, because what you do then, if you kind of want to come in as well, and very often, maybe I'm sitting in my cutie feeling a bit restless, not sure what to do with myself. Okay, I go and check out Ajahn Brahm. And so I go up and I sit down next to Ajahn Brahm, make myself a cup of tea. I don't say anything. I just kind of imbibe the energy, the osmosis. You know what I'm teaching by osmosis, right? It kind of just penetrates through your skin, that goes into you. So you just sit there for 10 minutes or whatever, have your cup of tea, and then you feel really relaxed afterwards. Because just the presence of someone like that is actually very, very powerful. And it's a very powerful teaching in its own right. To me, with Ajahn Brahm, it's more than his words is one thing, but actually the way he is as a person is far more interesting to me, because that shows the real qualities of a person, the way you deal with people, the peace that you have, the kindness that you have, the generosity. And he has so many extraordinary spiritual qualities. It's like, you know, one of those things I was going to ask you. Actually, I will ask you now. I was going to ask you, they say that familiarity breeds contempt, right? Is that
I've heard that saying.
Yeah. So
but I've heard you say with Ajahn Brahm, for you, it's been the opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about you,
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I mean, the thing is, that's something, what you're just talking about now is something that I've never experienced, because I only interact with Ajahn Brahm in this kind of like, listen to a talk way, or maybe after Wednesday night talk, I might have a little bit of something to ask him. And so he's always engaging with me, you know? I don't have a chance to just be like, okay, Ajahn Brahm, I'm just going to sit by you and imbibe your peace. You know, it doesn't quite happen that way. So, but I guess the other qualities I can see from the way I interact with him, or the way I have contact with him, is I can just see that, I mean, he really cares. Like, even though he's so busy, and he has so many people who are like, oh, Ajahn Brahm this, Ajahn Brahm that, you know, but I do this very sparingly, but if I really am like in a dire straits kind of position, I will hit him up, and and then he will make the time. Somehow he will make the time, and if he knows that you really need it, he'll give it to you. I mean, not tons and tons. I remember once I was asked to talk to him, and he's like, I forget how long, maybe it was for half an hour. He's like, oh, that's too long. so then I'm like, okay, scale it back. It won't take that long, Ajahn, I promise. But other times he has talking to me for longer. But again, I do this very sparingly, because I understand how much he does. And, it's just hard to begrudge him the time when you know what he's spending it on. Like, he just helps so many people. And that's what I find so inspiring. I find that just, that level of open-hearted altruism that I see in the way what he does with his life. That's something which, is really inspiring to me. But yeah, I don't know. There's so many things we can say about him.
Let me add a little bit to that, because I think that's a really, and I think this is actually one of the ways in which he has changed a lot over the years. Because the Ajahn Brahm, I remember from the early days I put in Anna Monastery, was a person who was extremely efficient. He was like the master of efficiency. And I remember he was telling me that he would work incredibly long hours building up the monastery. It's like 10-hour days, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year. He didn't have an hour off. And so he said that sometimes he wanted to complain. And of course the abbot in those days was Ajahn Jagaro. And so he thought, maybe I should go to Ajahn Jagaro and say, oh, can I have the occasional hour off, maybe 1 hour a week or something off, that would be nice. But then he said, no, actually, let me not ask that, because the question I should ask myself is, have I used every minute of the day to its maximum potential so far? And he promised himself, until he had made use of every minute to its maximum potential, he would not complain about not having enough time. That was kind of his attitude, yeah? And so he would, in those days, he would work really, really hard. And because of all the good merit he was doing, all the good karma he was doing, after a 10-hour day work, he would go back to his room, or his kuti, or his door on the forest, or whatever it was that he was living on at that time, or the tent, or the kind of the water tank full of water, or whatever. And then he would get into good meditation. Yeah, and this is kind of the extraordinary thing. And so he would spend his time extremely, extremely efficiently and extremely well. But what that meant was that the way he dealt with people was often a bit perfunctory. Yeah, and he tried to dismiss people quickly. He tried to get things done very fast. Everything was about efficiency. And that has lasted until almost up to maybe 4 or 5 years ago. He was like that. And one of his tricks, and I saw him do this in the monastery, and he learned little tricks how to dismiss people. I don't know if any one of you have been victim of his tricks, but I will now check on you. So he would do things like sitting in the dharna sala, and there was like a long queue of people, and time was getting a bit late, and he would kind of look up at the clock, very conspicuously, right? Look at the clock. And then people would say, oh yeah, I guess I'm getting a bit busy now, maybe I better go. And people would... It was very funny to see that.
I remember that because one time, I think I was already a nun. Maybe I was a nun, but I was visiting at Bodhinyana or something. So I went up after the dana and sat there and was asking him a little bit of this or that. Yeah. And he said, my trick, basically he told me the trick, and then he looked at the clock. Yeah. And I said, I just blurted it out. I didn't mean to say it, but I was like, Ajahn Brahm, that's so mean. And like the Upatak monk was like cracking up. No, he wasn't cracking up. He was just looking a bit like taken aback that I would say such a thing. Yeah. But that's another thing that I feel why I took Ajahn Brahm to be my teacher is because I feel I can say anything to him. Yeah. I can say anything, and he's not going to hold it against me or be offended or anything, which gives me a lot of birth. But for me, that's a reflection of his, high development. Is that he doesn't take himself seriously, and he can handle it. Yeah. So.
Thanks for backing me up on that one. That's what I said yesterday as well. He's so incredibly forgiving, most forgiving person in the world. Yeah. No, exactly. And actually one of those what you're just mentioning now, you saw him do the same thing. You're watching the clock and you say it's mean, but actually I don't know if it is mean. He doesn't come from a position of meanness. And one of the things that I always admired about Ajahn Brahm is he was never caught by the conventions of society here. He never does things because it is the acceptable way of doing things. He has a much larger picture. Everything is about Dhamma. And so what that means is that, he would sit there and talk to somebody and he would kind of break wind, right? That's what he would do, right? And sometimes people are kind of shocked, right? They're really shocked. And you hear these stories. There was one story I heard about this lady who was talking to him, and suddenly he kind of bursts out, right? And she kind of really shocked, and she stops in her tracks. And Ajahn Brahm says, hey, come on, carry on. and because for Ajahn, and in society this would be considered rude. But for Ajahn Brahm, this is just what the body does. Why should you hold back on what the body does, right? This is what the body is not very interesting anyway. The body is just full of these things that come out of it, and it's, when you open it up, it's not very pretty inside, etc. Why should you be concerned about these things? You should be relaxed with the body, allow the body to be here. And so he is not concerned about convention so much. What Ajahn Brahm is concerned about is what is good, what is right, and kind of the deeper idea of morality. And sometimes that can put people off. And so there's many examples. One of them is kind of the watch and the clock. Another one is this one I just mentioned.
Just looked at the clock.
and then but then many more things like that. Sometimes I remember when I first came to Bodhinyana Monastery, I brought a little gift. I brought some. I think it was Stilton cheese. I thought he's in English, but he must like Stilton cheese. Yeah? And I gave him the Stilton. He didn't look impressed at all when I gave him the Stilton. And so Ajahn Brahm, he is like, he may say thank you, but he may not, depending on the situation. And if he feels that kind of you are expecting a thank you from him, and he will not give a thank you probably, because that expectation is a kind of entrapment almost, is a kind of forcing someone to manipulate them to kind of act according to certain conventions. And that is the last thing that he wants. He wants to be free. He wants to be liberated from those kind of things. We tend to entrap each other all the time in all these kind of social expectations that we have. So if he feels that you're expecting something, he may not do it, and he may not say anything. But when you're not expecting it, suddenly he will say something, because then there's a free kind of expression of gratitude. For Ajahn Brahm, a thank you should be something that comes from the heart. It should be a real, something that actually works, something that matters, something that has a real spiritual meaning, not some kind of superficial social convention that we kind of adhere to. And that, I think, is beautiful. There's something powerful about that. There's something it shows all of us. When you listen to Ajahn Brahm and you feel that the way he's acting is offensive, ask yourself if there isn't something deeper going on. Because in my mind, Ajahn Brahm is never really offensive in a way coming from anything bad. It's just that he tries to go outside sometimes, the beyond what is acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, in that case about the clock, I don't think it's a social convention per se, but I think it's it's like widening our perspective. Like if I'm just thinking about like, oh, he's not giving me enough time, and it's like he's not valuing whatever I'm talking about. He's saying that, oh, I don't have time for this right now. It made make me feel a bit like harumphed or hurt or small or something. But then if I take a larger perspective on it, it's like, it may be compassionate to like the other people he has to serve today. Like maybe he has to give a talk later on that day, and he needs his energy to like help 1,000 people or 500 people, but also to learn that he considers compassion to ourselves important.
Yeah.
So maybe he's like, and now I understand actually. It's like, gosh, the shoe's on the other foot. Like sometimes when Ajahn Hasapanya is away, I have to I do the duty of like receiving the lay visitors after lunch thing. And I haven't learned yet how to be like, I know you're in a lot of distress, but it's 1:30 and I can't do this every day till 1:30. I haven't figured out how to do it. I have to ask Ajahn Brahm. But the thing is, I see now that it's not sustainable. Like he's got 24 hours. He's got a body that gets tired. Like he's got to know his limits, and he's got to set them for his own welfare too, but also the welfare of all the people that he can help. So then if we take a wide, I actually never thought he was mean-spirited. In that moment, you just feel a bit hurt, that's all. But actually, I think he's always, and you know what I thought when the title of this dialogue came? I'm like, there is no real Ajahn Brahm. I think all he is, we all see different aspects of him. And all he's doing, I think, is he's just doing what he feels is the most, or he knows is the most compassionate thing to do at that time for that person. So for you, it might be not thanking you for the Stilton cheese. For me, it might be like thanking me for something I've done for him, because it's funny, right? It's like he can do no wrong. Like if he doesn't thank you, you're like, oh, how inspiring. And if he thanks me for a small thing, I'm like, how inspiring. This big teacher who I've done this like small thing for him. And he remembered. Sometimes he will thank me for something I did like weeks ago, because, I don't know, that's the next occasion he has to talk to me. And then he will remember and he'll thank me. I'm like, oh, he thanked me, And so I think I wasn't expecting it, so maybe that's why he gave it to me. But also it's his way of showing kind of friendliness and encouragement and appreciation. So I think that I take that for a lesson, because, in Thailand, sometimes they tell you if you're a monastic, you're not supposed to thank the lay people. You're only supposed to say anumodana, something like that. And so I'm like, thank God I'm in the West, because it's just so complicated. So I can just say thank you to everybody, and it's all simple. But I think it's really nice to have, someone be so humble and approachable in the robes. Sometimes like in traditional Buddhist countries, it can be like, oh, they're up on this very high pedestal and you cannot touch them. But I feel Ajahn Brahm's really down to earth, and part of that is just expressing gratitude to people for small things. It means he notices and he appreciates, and that to me is actually a big thing.
Yeah, yeah. No, yeah. I can relate to that. I think, one of the things that you gain after knowing him for a long time, you gain a sense of trust. And so initially you might get hurt when he doesn't kind of acknowledge you or what you have done or whatever, doesn't say thank you. So that can happen initially. But after a while, you start to look at it differently because you gain that trust that this is someone who's coming from a good place, almost regardless. And then you are thankful for the lack of thanks, and you're thankful for the thanks, and it kind of everything goes around like that. I think that's true. But I want to ask you something else as well. And that is, okay, so now we're kind of praising Ajahn Brahm to the skies, which I think is good. I think that's it's correct. But does he have any bad qualities? Is there anything kind of thinking about Ajahn Brahm that you feel a bit more?
Yeah. When you sent me the email with your sort of like potential questions, I was horrified at this question. I'm like, oh, you're not going to ask this question at this like tribute event to Ajahn Brahm? I mean, that's just not on. But then I thought to myself, actually, that's kind of thing you could do with Ajahn Brahm. And he would probably appreciate it because, sometimes people think, they think, like people who aren't from here, I've heard this, other places, they think he's like got some kind of cult of personality thing going on in Western Australia. Like, oh yes, he's just this one monk there, so everybody, they're all gonna like there's some kind of cult thing. But what always impressed me was that actually I know Ajahn Brahm isn't like that, and he doesn't like that, and he does his best to like. If you're like acting too adulating, he'll be kind of like, he'll like sort of somehow like downplay it, or kind of like you can tell that that's not the thing to do with him. And so I think actually, and I did that early on because even when I was a layperson, I took offense at some talk he gave where he mentioned, where I felt he kind of told the story in a way that made him seem like such the hero of the story when actually it wasn't like he was the only factor, and so that kind of made me feel like But I remember I was staying at Munissara and I told Ajahn Bayama about this, and she said, you should tell him, and so I did. I remember I did it right there in the Dhammaloka reception area, and he took it really well. He said kind of like, thank you for telling me that. Thank you for the feedback. And, I speak a lot, so sometimes, I'm not mindful. And the next day he made a point when I was, in the Bintabad line to be like, nice to see you again, like kind of like no hard feelings kind of thing. And so I'm like, actually he'd be glad that we did this kind of impertinent, like, so what are the bad qualities of Ajahn Brahm? But I just said it in my example. So that's one that I feel sometimes, not just me, but sometimes people can feel, I don't know, other people have asked me about this, like, oh, you know him, is he like, why are people so, like, they can feel sometimes that, because he's just a really confident person. I don't think he's coming from a bad place. He's just naturally such a confident person. When he's like, oh, I didn't have any trauma in my childhood, I'm like, for a lot of people, if they came from a working class background and they attended these fancy schools on scholarship, they would feel a bit like traumatized at like, kind of like, oh, the other people made fun of them, or they felt sort of insecure, coming from a working, but like I'm sure he never did because he's like just confident, and so that confidence sometimes come across in a way that people take him to be a bit like a kind of like braggy or something, and and so that's something which, but because I don't, for me I just think of it like a speech tick. It's just some kind of a tick that people, like, for him, that's just maybe the way he talks, the way he tells stories, and he's so entertaining that maybe stories get better when you have that kind of, kind of effect. So I don't actually feel it's coming from an ultimately bad place, because like I said, he really doesn't take himself seriously and doesn't like people to like make a big deal about him. So yeah.
Good. Yeah, no, that's exactly good. Excellent. Yeah. And,
how about you? No.
How about me? I was just thinking whether someone asked whether we could have some questions and answers as well. How long have we been going for? 45 minutes already.
Yeah, we started a bit late. It's really.
What should we do later? Yeah. You're the boss. You're the master. Yeah.
I just checked with Elle, who's doing the AV, and she was showing me the chats while you guys are doing the talk.
Yeah.
And people are loving this, you know. So
Okay.
I feel bad that we have to cut off at 5 o'clock. But I think it's just the Be Quiet group that is happening. So maybe we can go on for another 10 minutes.
They're already going next door. They started next door already.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
that
So
we
then
decided
that's
this.
okay.
Yeah, we decided to have that next door, so
Okay.
not to get out. Yeah.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the online viewers are like very pleased with this conversation that is going on because they
Okay.
learn a lot from both of you and also about Ajahn Brahm, you know,
Yeah.
from the perspective of the two of you. Yeah. So you could just continue the dialogue.
carry on. Okay.
Are there more stuff in the paper that you've
Oh,
brought?
we barely touched on, you know, it's always like this. It's like you have like 10,000 questions and you just hope that one or two will get answered.
Yeah.
But
So, I think hearing from both of you, I feel very privileged now because Ajahn Brahm comes to Dhammaloka like on most Fridays. And then when he walk in, he would go to the admin office and then he'll ask, what can I do for you today? And then he'll walk to my office and he's like, Leha, what can I do for you today? And he'll sit at the table and we'll talk to him for 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, sometimes an hour, until the Upatak will come out to check whether he's still there.
Yes, there you go. Yeah.
So I think maybe you guys should apply to be an employee in BSWA, and then you will have a lot of airtime with Ajahn Brahm.
that's okay. I think you're doing a very creditable job already. Who can stand in your big shoes?
It's true. Again, I mean, coming back to this idea of how Ajahn Brahm has changed over the years, and he has changed a lot. And he used to be this incredibly efficient person. I didn't really get to that kind of fully at the end of the story. Very efficient. Everything was kind of timed down to the last minute. Short, kind of stay on the question, and he give the answer, and then he goes off, and that's kind of it. And he was very much like that. And when you worked with Ajahn Brahm, very often you had this feeling that he was using you like an instrument. Yeah, you weren't really a human being. Yeah, so we have this work job, and there's a hammer there, there's a drill there, and there's a human being there, and they're all kind of instruments in his kind of project. And so he was treating you very instrumentally, and that can be very kind of painful when you feel like an instrument. It's as if he doesn't see your human nature. And many people would react to that way of Ajahn Brahm being, because for him, the job needs to get done. You can do this job, okay, wheel the wheelbarrow, yeah? Wheel the wheelbarrow. That's it, right? Okay, so you wheel the wheelbarrow. And so that was kind of what it was like a little bit to be with Ajahn Brahm in the early days, and people often reacted to that. Not much time, instrumentalism. But the last few years, he has really changed. And I actually asked him about this, because I love to ask Ajahn Brahm about all these things, right? Because I think it's really cool to ask and see what he says about this. And I asked him, and the answer he gave was simply, well, I'm just getting older, and I guess, I have more time for people. That's really all he said. He didn't really give anything more explanation. But these days, he is giving people more time, yeah? And I can see that. And during the rains retreat at the monastery, we had this sign on the wall, all interviews stop at 12:30. Mm-hmm. That only lasted for a few days, and then he was going to back into his kind of old routine again. And he said, people come all this way to see me, and they have all these problems, just like you were saying before, yeah? And so you can't just kick them out. You have to sit down and listen to them.
You don't look at the clock no more.
He doesn't look at the clock. He hasn't been looking for the clock for years, yeah? It's kind of that's all done, the clock business.
Y'all got to take advantage, anyway.
And he does the same thing with the monks as well. He comes out for the monks, and then he chit-chats with us. And he has time, even for me, he has time sometimes. Yeah, he sits down with me and has a chat with me.
I'm sure. I mean, I'm sure he has time for you.
He has lots of time for me, actually. I'm one of the most, I sit next to him all the time. I have kind of this very privileged position. But I don't want to abuse that, yeah, and that's kind of one of the things. So he has actually changed enormously.
But why? What caused that shift? Aside from, he's getting older. I mean, has it really been just the past few years? Or?
It's only been, it's been gradual, obviously, but now it is a kind of very clear shift, and that's only been the past 2 or 3 years, I think, not even that much, quite recently. I think it's just he's slowing down a lot in general, and he doesn't like this kind of fast transitions anymore from one thing to another one, and it's giving people more time. And so I think it is our job in that situation to remember that the place Ajahn Brahm really wants to be is in his cave. That's kind of where he really wants to be. And so sometimes to make it short and not kind of abuse that kind of generosity on his part. I think that is also very important.
I had one of my questions about that. I mean, he kind of talks about a little bit like, I'm getting older, I'm getting more tired. But does he actually really get tired? And I mean, in which case we have to really be more, I guess, reserved in our asking of his time. Yeah.
Yeah, he's getting more tired. I think one of the things about Ajahn Brahm is always had this incredibly powerful mind. Number one, he's been very bright, very intelligent, and number two, very bright because of his meditation practice. A kind of two very strong things coming together in one person. And because of that, he has always thought the mind is the thing that really matters. The body doesn't matter very much. So you kind of force everything with the mind. You use your mind to lead the way. Just go back to your kuti, close your eyes, meditate powerfully for an hour or half an hour or whatever, and you come out again brilliantly shining and everything is fine. But I think he has, I don't know, I haven't asked him about this because I'm a bit afraid of some questions I'm a little bit kind of, can I ask this? But I think sometimes he has underestimated a bit the effect the body can have on the mind, and so he hasn't really looked after himself the way he should do, and he has kind of not been eating. He doesn't eat much, but what he eats, right, is kind of the problem, and also no exercise and these kind of things, and eventually the body does have an effect on the mind, and I think this is kind of what has happened, and I think he has underestimated that because his mind has been so extraordinarily powerful. I remember he used to say that, when you come out of a really deep meditation, you become like a nuclear reactor here. Remember saying that? He said that many years ago, and I thought, that's really cool, to be like a nuclear reactor. But these days, that nuclear reactor is kind of not as strong as it used to be. It may still be nuclear, but a little bit less fuel or whatever is going on. And so it takes more time to recharge and all these kind of things. So definitely he's getting more tired. And so it is our job. I know everyone who cares for him and who wants him to last longer. What do you think? Actually, this brings us to this point. We should make him last long, right? Because if he dies, what will be the abbot. What will happen then? You will be the abbot.
No. Let me make that clear. But I mean that's kind of my concern. Is kind of like, how do we take care of him better? I mean, not even just that isn't that being instrumental? We want you to last long, so thou can serve us longer. But no, I mean, we also really care for him because, I mean, even if it doesn't mean that he'll be here to teach us longer or whatever, but you don't want him to be like exhausted all the time, and so I think it's good that people know that he gets tired, and that he is, as they say, not getting old but already old. So I guess we have to kind of be more like sensitive about that. So,
I think so. And I think it's a good kind of selfishness. When you recognize your dependency on a teacher and you want him to live for that reason, as long as it is to kind of live the spiritual life in a good way. I think that's an acceptable kind of selfishness. Is that true? I reckon it is. I
mean, we all do that. Like we're always like, on his happy birthday card type thing. It's always like, please live long. Long may you live for our sake, not for yours. Right. But of course. But may it be a quality life, and you're not just pushing yourself,
So I think to me that there was like two things there. The first thing is that yes, we want him to live as long as possible for our own sake, for his sake. I don't know. Sometimes I wonder whether he really wants to live or not. But anyway, that's a different discussion. His sake is very hard to know exactly what that is.
Yes.
But to me, the real lesson here is the lesson of impermanence. That's kind of the real lesson to me, and because it's kind of, you can see that fear coming up in you, and when that fear comes, you know that you are not really dealt with that impermanence, dealt with that uncertainty, and that to me is kind of the critical thing here. And so you have to kind of filter these things through proper right view and things, and then kind of understand. But yes, we should look after him. So how should we do that?
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe he doesn't have to do all the things he does. Like, I think he's already delegated a lot of things. I don't really know in the monks' monastery how you've delegated some of his old jobs. But maybe he can do more of his teachings by Zoom, and he doesn't have to travel so much.
Will you come more to Dhammaloka and give more talks to help out?
Hey, it's not up to me. So y'all do the programming from up there. I just do your bidding when requested. So
Venerable Hasapanya, are you listening to this talk?
No, it's not just her. It's all you programmers. I don't know who decides these things. Who decides these things? Okay. So, but no, I mean,
but she's an important person in this, right? So I want to get her on board. I
think she's supportive. She's just protective. That's all. She's protective, and like a mother, she wants to make sure all her little ducks are okay and they're not overly burdened and they're not, so then, I mean, she's getting so busy nowadays that her ducks will have to have to join the workforce. So I mean, we'll see how it goes. But I mean, yeah. Of course, it would be always. We always feel it's an honor to be able to teach here. It's not a burden; it's an honor. So, anyway.
Good. Yeah. So, what will be his legacy when he passes away? What will he be? Will he have a legacy, or will he just disappear and that will be the end of it?
Of course, he'll have a legacy, a major legacy. Yeah. But you know, I like this quote from. Anybody know Maya Angelou? She's this poet in America. First Black American poet to be invited to speak, I believe, at a presidential inauguration. So she's, she said this. I mean, do you know why I know this? Because Auntie Ramani's daughter, Venerable Upeka, sent this to me. But anyway, it's like, what are we nuns doing watching Oprah? But anyway, Oprah is the second most influential spiritual teacher in the world. So this is legitimate. So anyway, so in this conversation between Oprah and Maya Angelou, you know, Oprah thinks, oh, my biggest legacy will be the school for girls I've, you know, set up in South Africa to help young Black girls really develop leadership skills. And then Maya Angelou goes, you don't know I can't do her voice, but something like that, you don't know what your legacy will be. And what she meant by that was that actually your biggest legacy is nothing we can point to, but it's all the people's hearts and lives you've touched in ways they may not even know, you know, and in ways that keep paying forward. So I think Ajahn Brahm's real legacy is all those people who read Opening the Door of Your Heart. All those people I gave those books to. And all those people who watched either the live or, you know, on the internet, his talks. You know, he says so countless people have told him he's saved their life. But not just saving their life, but giving them a new life or giving them a new way to live. And also the inspiration, you know, the way all those good qualities, you know, is not just reflected in, oh, Ajahn Brahm, he's so great, oh, he's done so many things, but he's showed us what it's like to be a human and have those qualities and inspires us to try to, you know, follow that example or live it as well. And that's something which you can't even measure the effect that has, rippling. So we don't know what his legacy is going to be. But what do you think his legacy will be?
No, I think that's very well put. It means that whether you remember Ajahn Brahm or not actually is irrelevant. The real legacy is the kind of the effect that he has left on many people's lives and on society or whatever. That's the real legacy. So even if you forget about Ajahn Brahm, the legacy will kind of be there regardless. In people's hearts, as you say, or in the spiritual development.
But in a more like, in a less abstract and sort of like wide-ranging way, I think, you know, there's some clear markers that we can point to. I mean, I don't say this just because I'm a bhikkhuni, but obviously this bhikkhuni ordination thing is like huge in terms of his legacy. And it's not just in terms of giving women the opportunity to lead a monastic life on par with bhikkhus, but it's actually bigger than that. Because what he has helped to build, like a big part you know, of credit can be given to him is, but not all of course, but is building like a really thriving fourfold assembly in the BSWA. I mean, that's very rare to find where you have a strong bhikkhu sangha, a growing bhikkhuni sangha. I mean, at the last bhikkhuni ordination, he commented, wow, look at how big the sanghas are now in the room at Bodhinyana at that time. Of course, he cracked, I hope the rafters don't fall on us, but and then you kill the whole sangha. But yeah, that, but also the lay people. I mean, it's a very strong community of lay people here. I mean, I was really sort of like, wow, this is a really cool idea that to become the BSWA member, you have to say you're going to keep the 5 precepts. I mean, I've never seen that anywhere before. And so I think that's a real legacy, because when you've got the fourfold assembly in place, even if the teacher dies, like the Buddha died, he only felt, okay, I can die now because I have got the fourfold assembly in place. So I feel like even if, you know, I mean, we hope for his long life, but there will be the day. But what he will leave behind is this fourfold assembly that's pretty good, and hopefully that will survive to tell the tale, and it won't just be like, because sometimes, in a lot of monasteries in Thailand, they may have a big Kuba Ajahn, and there's so much, like the monastery is really big and really strong, lots of monks, lots of lay people going there. But then as soon as the teacher dies, it all kind of falls apart, and it doesn't really survive. And what they said about Ajahn Chah was that didn't happen with his monastery and sort of his group and his lineage, is because he really de-emphasized his own role and tried to build up a strong Sangha system and a strong kind of structure of the Sangha that could operate without him. And I feel that that's something which Ajahn Brahm has encouraged us to do. Like that's probably why he doesn't come to the nuns' monastery that often, is because he wants us to be independent. Yeah. And so that's something which. So then, I think that's a legacy that he will leave.
Okay.
What about you?
Okay,
you don't have to. You probably, if you've already talked about this on Friday night, we can go to some other questions.
No, no, good. That's great. It's really nice to hear all these things. Actually, it's really it's excellent. So, but you asked me as well about how does he deal with the monks? How is that different from the nuns? So what does he say to the nuns that he doesn't say to the monks? I forgot to ask you that question this would actually be very interesting. So does he have any special teachings for the nuns?
Well, if you really want to know, he gives the nuns these esoteric meditation instructions that are only to be taught to the highly advanced practitioners.
I thought that might be the case. Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding. But I mean, does he ever just read out some Dhammapada verses to you, which is what he used to do for Ovadas?
Right, that's what it was. Right. Okay. Yeah.
No, I don't think. I mean, I don't know, right? That's a question when I read it. I'm like, how do I know? I don't know what he teaches you guys. I only know what he gives at a Wednesday night talk to the both. But I don't know.
When it comes to Munissara monastery, for example, is that different from when you come to Bodhinyana monastery?
Well, I mean, it's hard to tell. It's different because it's a Q&A format. And so it's... But he doesn't say anything drastically different in terms of his style, So for me, I really don't know. I don't know does he teach you any esoteric teachings only to the bhikkhus? I don't know. I'm not sure, but I guess we can't compare because you don't know what he teaches us and we don't know what he teaches you. So it's kind of, But do you think that, I don't know. Yeah, that's kind of a hard question either way.
Well, he does. I mean, when he knows you well, it's different, and he will give a different teaching because of that kind of closeness, and also because the group is slightly different. When he's with the monks, because he knows them for so long, he may actually act slightly differently. And so one of the things that I sometimes do, which I think is one of the things you have to do with Ajahn Brahm, you have to kind of ask for his compassion, and then he will kind of come forward and he will do something for you. Right? And so I often go to Ajahn Brahm, and instead of kind of challenging him, these days I just ask him an open question about what he thinks about something. And then I will listen to his answer, and if I disagree, I won't say anything. Because I know that's kind of just annoying for him if I kind of keep disagreeing all the time. So I just listen, and then I take on board what I like, and what I don't like, okay, let me talk about this some other time, if I don't like it, not now. That's one thing I do, and that actually is a very, very useful thing to do with Ajahn Brahm. If he feels that you are after a particular answer, that is really off-putting for Ajahn Brahm. He doesn't want that. He feels again that you are pressuring him in a certain way. He feels that you're coming from a need rather than from actually really asking a question. And the other thing I do with Ajahn Brahm, which also I find very useful on a personal level, I often ask him at least once a year, what can I do better? What do you think I should change in my conduct or in the way I do or in my service to the monastery or whatever? And that's kind of really nice. And very often he will give answers that you don't expect. This is kind of Ajahn Brahm. He won't say you got too much anger. He would never say things like that at all, right? He would say something like, really, maybe stay a bit more at Bodhinyana monastery. Don't travel so much. That's what he's been saying to me recently, right? And that's kind of sweet because you feel that you are, now he needs a bit more support because he's getting old and these kind of things. And that's really nice. And I feel really touched by that when he says that kind of thing. And of course, I would like to support him if I can. And other times he says other little things like that, which are completely out of left field, right? Things that I don't really expect at all. And so these kind of little things like that have opened the side from Ajahn Brahm to me that otherwise can be kind of hard to discover, actually.
Yeah, I
So,
mean, that's one thing that I've been curious about, because in his Dhamma talks, he always says like, oh yeah, I never tell off the monks, I don't tell them what to do and all of that. But I wonder if he really, like, never, like, that's not part of his teaching arsenal, is to kind of like not in a harsh way, or not in a like angry way or anything, but just, does he ever like tell you, and okay, that's not on or anything?
Almost never. Yeah, that is actually that's not just true. That's actually true. That's largely true. He doesn't really say anything. The way he works, he always sees the best in everyone. Yeah, and that kind of, and so if there is even if there is an argument in the monastery, he will very rarely try to sort it out. He will just see the best side in both people, and then he will come to me and tell me some kind of story. Oh, I saw them together. They look so happy, so everything must be okay. And that's kind of the end of the story. And even though you may know that there's still kind of something underneath going on, but this is kind of how he works. He always sees the best in people, and actually, it's a very beautiful way of being with others, because when he sees the best in you, you want to live up to that. And I find that in myself, because he always sees the best in me, even though I may feel a bit rotten inside or whatever, he still sees the best in me. And then I want to live up to that, and I want to be, to have those kind of those kind of qualities that actually he sees in you. And so I think it often works. But it means that he doesn't really deal with issues. Issues he doesn't deal with. He just acts with compassion. He acts with kindness, and then somehow they sort themselves out. And I think the overall result is actually very positive. There may be situations you can argue maybe he should do more, but the overall result is an incredibly harmonious monastery. But in another monastery, there's never any arguments. There's never anything like that at all, basically.
There's never an argument.
There's never really any kind of arguments between monks, right? They may have a discussion about something, but in a positive kind of way, not in a kind of negative sense. And so that overall leadership which basically is compassion and seeing the best in people all the time, I would say the overall result is far better. And this kind of idea that it is the abbot's job to tell people off and to kind of do this or do that, I think it's dangerous, and it very often just leads to a kind of more and more difficult situation, because there is no end to that kind of fault finding and problems.
Well, I don't know. I just don't feel like telling off is kind of a like exaggerated term. But I mean, even me, right? I don't live with him, but there have been times, when it's just like a look, like when. I can count on. I have one example, okay, maybe 1.5, where he actually and you stood up for me one. I was like staying at Jhana Grove, like kind of new in the neighborhood. I didn't really know how to get to Bodhinyana by walking through the bush, and I'm supposed to get my lunch at Bodhinyana. I came like a little bit late, right? And after that, he was like, we were waiting for you. And you were like, we weren't really waiting. But then he was kind of like, like you should come here on time kind of thing. And I was like, oops. So that was my one half. Ajahn Brahm did tell me off. See, he does tell people off. And then the other time, it wasn't quite a telling off. It was like during that Vasa, there were other retreats happening during the Vasa. So there was potential that I had to be moved from my cottage to another cottage. And I remember I was going for my normal meditation interview with him, and he told me that, oh yeah, you don't have to move after all, they have enough space, whatever. And I don't know if I think I might have said something that expressed my relief that like, oh good, I'm glad I don't have to move. And then he said, as a monastic, you should think you only have a roof for one night. Yeah. And like, kind of like, can't be like thinking anything's yours. And I was thinking, damn it, I shouldn't have said that. Now he knows that was my thought. But then another, very quickly though, I'm like, no, I'm really glad I got a lesson out of him, because it's so rare that I will be in a position where he can tell me what's on, what's not, what's proper for monastic, what's not. And so I really treasured that moment. And I wish there were more chances when he could do that, And there have been maybe a handful of other times when I might have said something or did something that was a little bit off. And then he just gives me he just has the slightest look where you can see that, oh, that wasn't on, huh? And then, and I really value those as well as like teaching moments. And so for me, I feel like that is very helpful for me, and it doesn't make me feel bad. It just makes me feel like edified, and yeah. So I was just wondering if you lived with him, you'd get more of that stuff. But it sounds like no, he's just all about everybody is good. I see everybody as good, and
there's very little. Yeah, no. I think even in the case when he says, "Oh, we're waiting for you," I'm not sure if that was a telling off or just a statement of fact. Actually, because that's kind of what he will say sometimes.
Well, but then he said you should be here on time.
Is that what he said?
Yes,
yes. Really? Okay, in that case, yeah. He very rarely says that kind of thing. Even though some of the monks can be pretty slack, he doesn't say anything. He just
maybe he gave up. Yeah. Maybe that was when he was younger. Yeah. But maybe he just realized that what you said that's who knows. But
who knows?
Yeah. But anyway, yes.
Yeah. Good. Okay. Excellent. Yeah. So.
So, do people want to go now? It seems like it's getting to a bit of a hour now, is it?
Yeah. I didn't realize it's gone on for another half an hour, but it was very nice to hear. Everyone agrees? So can we give 3 sadhus to the 2 great teachers?
Okay. Excellent.
And can I just quickly mention, as part of this celebration, we will be producing an e-book where we've contacted people, and I think we've also put the message out that people can send in messages. So we've received them, and we are compiling the book right now. It's an e-book, so once it's available, we'll put it on the website and you can download it. But we have the intention to print 800 copies for free distribution. And we are hoping to do a fundraising, so there's a donation box where Eddie is sitting on the table. And feel free to contribute towards that. And for those people online who wants to contribute, you can donate directly to BSWA. And perhaps use the PayPal button, then you can leave a remark saying e-book so that we know it's specifically for that purpose. So with that, I'd like to thank again Ajahn Brahmali and Ajahn Munissara for being here and giving us such an enlightening talk and a spill on their teacher. I feel like we've known Ajahn Brahm much better now. Okay, thank you so much.
Let's do the Arahang Sammasamveda together. Let's put to end up. Yeah.